closet door was closed when he arrived, but that was all. Nothing else, no note, no smell, no immediate indication that the space had once been occupied. The room itself was small, the kind landlords advertise as cozy to families who never ask questions. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, apparently. The landlord, a thin man with thinning hair and an unnervingly wide smile, shrugged when asked why the closet was off limits. "It's nothing," he said. "Just don't worry about it." The words sounded ordinary, but the tone was not. There was a hesitation, just a fraction of a second, before the smile returned. The kind of hesitation that catches in the corner of your mind long after the conversation ends. Elliot had never been particularly observant, and yet, moving into this room, he immediately felt the sense that he was not entirely alone. It was subtle at first, a feeling, a pause, a draft that shouldn't have been there, even though every window was shut tight. The closet itself was standard: unpainted wood, a rod for clothes, a shelf above it. The door was flush with the wall, the kind that required a light pull to open. And when he did, there was nothing. Nothing except the faintest imprint in the carpet, as if someone had pressed their feet there and then left. He chalked it up to a trick of the light or the previous tenant's habits. The first night, the unease intensified. He couldn't sleep, not because of the sound, but because of the absence. The room felt too complete, too perfectly empty. Shadows pooled in corners with unnatural patience. In the closet, he imagined shapes, small ones, watching, waiting. He told himself it was imagination, the mind's way of exaggerating what it could not see. Yet when he closed the closet door, the faintest click, like a lock turning from the inside, made him freeze in bed. The air smelled faintly of dust and something else, something damp, almost alive. By the third night, Elliot had begun to notice patterns. Things moved, or at least appeared to. A coat he hung neatly would later drape itself over a chair, not tossed but positioned with care. The shoes he left by the door would shift slightly in their alignment, just enough to feel deliberate. He convinced himself he was imagining it, but he began to check compulsively, cataloging every subtle deviation, as if the act of noting might reveal a rational explanation. Nothing ever did. He told a friend casually that he felt watched. The friend laughed lightly and dismissed it. "New place, your brain's just adjusting, you'll be fine." Elliot wanted to believe this. He wanted to be reasonable. Yet the closet door loomed, an accusatory presence. He began to leave it open when he left the room, telling himself that if anything were in there, it would have a harder time acting unnoticed. But opening it brought no comfort. Shadows deepened. A faint, irregular tapping sometimes echoed from within, soft enough to be ignored, persistent enough to be disturbing. By the end of the first week, the air in the room had thickened. Elliot noticed it first as a sort of resistance, like moving through water. The closet seemed to absorb light, and even when the door was wide open, darkness lingered there longer than it should. He began speaking aloud to it, at first as a joke, then increasingly in a whisper. "I know you're here," he said one evening, half expecting to feel a presence recoil or react. Nothing happened. But the floorboard outside the closet creaked, as though someone or something had shifted weight. He stopped inviting friends over. Social media messages went unanswered, work calls were delayed. He became meticulous about locking the apartment door behind him, checking the closet twice before leaving. Every so often he would open the door, peer inside, and see the faintest trace of motion, a flicker, a shadow, a sudden stillness that felt like it had been waiting for him to look away. He began recording the room at night, but the footage revealed nothing. Empty shelves, empty floor, empty air. Only his own reflection in the dark glass of the windows stared back at him, wide-eyed, pale, restless. Sleep became impossible. When it came, it was fragmented. He dreamed of the closet as a room larger than it should be, a labyrinth of shelves and corridors, populated with shapes that knew his name, that whispered it just at the edge of hearing. Waking moments as bled into sleep, he sometimes caught himself talking to the closet during the day, reasoning with it, apologizing for imagined slights. It had become a fixture, a second roommate who required attention, though no one else could see it. The line between presence and absence blurred. One night, compelled by a curiosity he could no longer resist, he forced himself to stay in the room after dark. Lights off, door open. He sat on the floor, knees drawn to his chest, and watched. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional shifting of air. Then a sound, soft, almost imperceptible, like breathing. He froze, rationality fraying. The sound came again, rhythmic now, deliberate. A hand-sized shadow crossed the floor, cast by no light he could identify. It moved toward him slowly, cautiously, as if testing limits. His chest tightened. He tried to speak, but his voice stuck in his throat. He fled the room briefly, returning with a baseball bat he had never owned before, bought online in a haze of fear. He set it beside him and sat, waiting. The shadow did not approach. It did not recede. It seemed to hover just at the periphery, aware of him, knowing, patient. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and he slept with the closet door open and the bat within reach. The air smelled of damp carpet and dust, of something long undisturbed, yet faintly acrid, metallic. He woke to a quiet room. Everything seemed normal, and yet he knew, with a clarity that did not need words, that it had been there, watching, always there. Weeks passed. Elliot grew pale, thin, a hollowing presence himself. He did not leave the apartment for long. The landlord avoided him in passing, averted gaze, as if anticipating a question better left unasked. He stopped eating meals regularly. Conversations with co-workers dwindled to monosyllables. The closet had become a barometer of his sanity. If he opened it and felt nothing, relief washed over him, shallow and brief. If he opened it and felt the absence press back, anxiety surged, thrumming in his veins. He began speaking less, recording his own voice at night, asking questions he could never answer. Are you here? Do you need me to leave? What do you want? The final escalation came without fanfare. Elliot had convinced himself he could negotiate, that if he simply acknowledged its presence, it would cease its subtle manipulations. But it did not. One morning he awoke to find the apartment quiet, eerily so, with a sunlight that seemed to have lost its warmth. He approached the closet, noting the faint traces of dampness on the floor that had not been there the night before. The door, slightly ajar, revealed nothing, yet the air inside moved differently, as if breathing. Elliot stepped closer. The temperature dropped sharply. The shadows within deepened unnaturally, and then he heard the faintest whisper, intelligible only to him. Finally. He stumbled backward. Rational thought recoiled, but the whisper repeated, now more deliberate, more intimate, as though speaking directly into the folds of his mind. Finally. And then a sound of movement, slow, measured, as if the closet had room inside it he had never imagined. Elliot's hands shook uncontrollably. The thought occurred to him horrifyingly that The closet might not be confined to the walls it occupied, that the space had been living alongside him, watching, absorbing his routine, his patterns, his vulnerabilities. He realized he had been sharing his life, his habits, his very being with something entirely patient, entirely silent, and entirely alien in its patience. When he screamed, it was quiet, internal, a tremor of despair. The closet door had closed on its own with the finality of a sentence. The air in the room returned to ordinary temperature. Sunlight streamed through the window and the apartment looked as if nothing had happened. The coat was hung neatly on the chair, the shoes aligned in perfect symmetry. Elliot stared at the closet, shaking, chest heaving, mind fracturing. And he understood, finally, that the thing was not in the closet. It had always been in him, in the rhythm of his days, in the gaps of his attention, in the quiet assumption of solitude. The closet was only a door. Elliot left the apartment that day. He did not return. He did not answer calls. He did not speak of it. But those who met him noticed the change. Eyes darting to corners, an obsessive cataloging of the room, the compulsive checking of doors and windows. He had left a piece of himself in the spare room, and though the space now lay empty and silent, the subtle, patient awareness he had tried to name as it persisted. The apartment remained on the rental market, clean, quiet, and deceptively ordinary. But longtime residents spoke quietly about the closet, how the air inside sometimes shifted, how shadows lingered, and how new tenants sometimes felt watched without knowing why. It is remarkable, in retrospect, how little a presence requires to exist. Silence, routine, and observation are enough. It is patient. It learns. It waits. And often, by the time you realize it is there, it has already moved inside you. If this story unsettled you, good. That means you're paying attention. Subscribe for more nightmares that refuse to fade. Until next time, stay vigilant.